It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Rose Feldman. Your maiden name was Christman,
Yes.
and you come from Lithuania.
Yes.
If you can tell us a little bit about your family and your origins.
Okay. All right. I was born in Rakashok in Lithuania, and we grew up there until I was 8 years old.
When were you born?
I was born in February of 1931, and then when the war started, we wanted to leave Rakashok. We lived there. My father was a shochet, and my mother had a store that sold piece goods for clothing, to be made to clothing. She often traveled to Memel to buy goods for the store. My mother was kind of a businesswoman, and my father was a shochet in Rakashok.
And Rose, you have this beautiful picture of your family.
This is a picture of my family when in 1932. That's my mother and my father with a beard, and my Aunt Batsheva and cousin Leah Yaffa. And this is my family. It's my sister and the little one, me, and my sister Esther, and my brother Nachum.
And your sister who's next to you, what was her name?
My sister next to me is Chana. And
So you were the youngest.
I was the youngest, and Nachum, my brother, was the oldest. And when I was 8 years old, the war had broken out, and I had an uncle who was a rabbi in Syracuse, New York, who came, and he wanted he came in 1932 to visit us because my grandfather lived with us. My grandfather's name was Moshe Yalovetsky, and he lived with us. And when he passed away in 1932, my uncle wanted us to leave Rakashok and move to the United States.
Can I just show
Yes.
a few photos of your shtetl where you...
Yes, this is the house where we lived in. We lived on Kamayo Gas in Rakashok, and this is the maid. This is my brother and my sisters and I. And this is in front of the house also. It's near the well, which was called the Brunnen, and that's where we got our water because we had no electricity and no running water in our house.
And do you remember the maid?
I remember Duna, yes.
She was
Her name
Lithuanian?
was Duna. She was Lithuanian, and she was very kind to us. And she was with us for about 5 or 6 years until she left. And these are my Aunt Daba, who lived in Ponadel, and her son Avram, who was in medical school in Lita. And this was a cousin. This is my uncle Rabbi Yalo, who came to Lita. He came in 1932 to visit the family, and my sister Esther, that was much later, and an aunt. Okay?
And in this picture?
Oh, this picture was taken in the United States. My uncle Rabbi Yalo and his son and daughter-in-law, who was Rosalind Yalo, who was a Nobel Prize winner in 1979 for medicine in the United States. And that was the family.
And here's a picture of your parents.
My parents, yes, at my wedding in 1955. And this is a picture of my brother, Harav Nachum Kreisman, from Petach Tikva. He lived in Petach Tikva for since 1953. He was there for about 50 years. This is my sister Annette, Hannah, and me, and with my aunt Batsheva and Shmuel Pintashevitz. And this is me with two friends from my school.
And this was from Lita, from Lithuania.
This is all from Rakshik. Although my aunt and uncle lived in Ushpal. It's just called Ushpalis, a very small shtetl.
And did you go to kindergarten or
Yes, I went to first grade, and my sisters...
Was it a Jewish school?
Oh yes, a Jewish school. My brother went to Cheder, and then he went to Telz Yeshiva, and he was there until we left. And when he came to America, he was enrolled in Ner Yisrael Yeshiva in Baltimore, Maryland. From there, Rav Cutler came to Baltimore. He wanted to look for some nice bachurim to start his yeshiva in Lakewood, New Jersey. And he met my brother, Nachum, and he said, I would like a young man like that in my yeshiva. So after 4 years in Ner Yisrael, Nachum went to Lakewood, and he lived there until 1954, or like 1953, and he stayed, and when he went to Israel, and he went to Israel, met Yafa Mandelbaum, whose grandfather was from the Mandelbaum Gate here in Yerushalayim, and he never came back. He lived in Petach Tikva for many years until he passed away.
And he was a dayan?
He was a dayan for all
his
stuff. Yeah, he was the first American to become dayan, appointed to be dayan. He was very well known.
And Rose, what was your name in Lithuania?
My name was Glassman.
What did people call you? Your first name?
My name was Rochel.
Rochel.
Yeah.
And Rochel, Rose, can I just ask?
Yeah.
Growing up, what is your first recollections? What do you remember?
Well, my recollection of Rakashik, I remember where we lived. I was not very happy in Rakashik. Because we didn't have electricity, we didn't have running water, we had to go out to the Brunnen. There was an outhouse far away. It was, I think even as a young child, I was not happy there, and when we came to America, I thought it was a great adventure, and I loved America since I saw the Statue of Liberty as we arrived. It was a wonderful moment in my life, and I thought, this is what I will love. I loved living in America.
But your home in Lita.
In Lita,
it must have been a very loving home.
It was a very loving home, very sparse. I remember being frightened a lot because many times on a Friday night, the non-Jews would walk through the streets and say, kill the Jews, we'll kill the Jews. And we used to close the shutters.
This
was in 1931, 1932, until we left in 1939.
Did you ever have any anti-Semitic incidents personally?
No, not in. I think I was too young, so we didn't. But we did feel it. We felt the Jews in Rakashik lived in the inside, within the city limits, and the Goyim lived outside. And subsequently, after the war, in 2003 or something, I went back to Rakashik. I went back to see what was there. My house where we lived in was not there. It was now converted into a store, but the other houses next door, the next house, was exactly the type of a house I lived in. And I was looking for elderly people to interview them, to ask them, where were you during the war? And everybody said, oh, they were lived outside in the country. They didn't know what was happening. That's what I was told. I went to Ponadel, where my aunt Daba Pintashevitz lived, and they were very wealthy people. They had a big business where they sold products for the farmers who came in, and wood, all kinds of things like that. So I saw a man sawing wood on the street, and I asked him, I said, did you know the Pintashevitzes? And he said, oh yes. So I said, what happened to them? What happened to their house? Because I had the address. He said, oh, it burned down. And he told me, he said, all the people were marched out, and without much remorse or anything. And of course, all the people from the Shtetlach around Rakshik, all of the small Shtetlach, were marched out, and they to the 9th fort, and they were shot. They were lined up and shot. So the Goyim knew that they were marched out, but they spoke without much remorse at all.
Was it very difficult to go back to Lithuania?
I wanted to go back I was just curious. It was difficult, but I wanted to go back and see it. And we also went to the cemetery, and we looked for graves. Now, nobody had been to the cemetery since 1938 or before, and we actually crawled on the ground because a lot of the stones were turned over, and with our hands we went to feel this to see if we could find any graves. And I did find Moshe Yalovetsky, my grandfather. I did find his stone. It was very, very exciting to see that, and it hadn't been tended to. And I saw a woman standing in a farmhouse, and I said, where were you during the war? And she said, oh, we lived quietly. Did you know what was going on? No, we didn't know. That was the reaction of most of the people. And Rakshik still in 2004 was not, there were some streets that weren't paved yet, some streets were. Of course, the church was in the center of town, and it contained a big yard and flowers and trees. That was going, but people who were living in the houses where Jews used to live, they didn't care, they didn't know, they said, and they were living in the Jewish houses where we lived, that because we just ran, we left everything. In December of 1939, my mother went, and we had the affidavits to come to America. However, we did not have visas, so my mother went many times to apply for a visa, and they wouldn't give it to her. So one day she went off to Kovna and sat there for a whole week, and she just sat in this office every day. She asked for a visa.
In which consulate?
In Lita, in Kovna.
But which country?
She needed a visa for America, to come out from Lithuania. We had to get out from Lithuania, and finally they gave her the visa, and they said, do not come back again.
Who gave the visa? Was this the American consulate?
The Lithuanian consulate, because
they gave an exit visa.
Yes, the exit visa. Yes, because we would not have had the problem. If we had an exit visa, we could leave, and they were allowing we came to America, America was letting us in.
But because you had affidavits from
Yeah,
family
we had
in America.
affidavits that my father was going to have a job, and he was going to be the assistant rabbi to my uncle in Syracuse, New York, and so they gave us exit visas.
Who was the family that gave the surety, or they gave the...
Oh, the money to...
Not only the money, but that they signed, or
the affidavit, yes,
affidavits.
was I had an uncle and another relative by marriage from Baltimore, Maryland. That's where we settled, and they were very wealthy.
Do you remember their names?
So, yes, Chertkov. My uncle was Isaac Shapiro, and David Chertkov was the man. They were related by marriage, so they gave us the affidavit.
And did they send money that you to pay for the ship?
No, we did not have money for that, but so my mother's sister, Dubba, who lived in Punnerdale, who had the big business there, my aunt went to her, and she gave us the money for passage, but they stayed in Punnerdale and they perished.
They perished?
Yeah, they have perished.
And who went to America from your family?
My whole family, my mother, my father, and 4 children.
And grandparents?
No, my grandparents were not alive anymore. So just our immediate family came, and there were relatives in America. My mother had a brother and a sister in America, and my father had 3 brothers and 2 sisters here in America that had come about in 1910, 1914. As soon as they earned enough money for passage, they came to America.
So, Rose, can I ask
Yeah.
you, so how come your mother's siblings and your father, why did they not give the affidavits that you could come?
My relatives who were living here,
Yeah.
well, I guess they were all struggling to make a living.
Maybe they had to put a deposit?
And they had to put a deposit where this Mr. Chertkov, who was very wealthy, so to him it was okay to give us the
And did
money.
you have other relatives that stayed behind in Lithuania?
Oh yes, we had relatives. My cousin my aunt Batsheva, she died, and we had a lot of cousins. Nobody got out after us. No.
This picture,
Yes.
did they survive?
Well, no, this picture, no. No, this was my Batsheva and her husband. No, they perished right away. Yeah, and everybody else. And not only that, the people from Rakashik, they begged my parents, can you get us affidavits or something to let us get out? It was just impossible. It was impossible. People begged, to help us to get out somehow or other. And I think the whole town, because we were the last people to leave the town, and we just ran. As soon as my mother came back with the affidavit, with the visas, we ran, and we went to Tallinn, and then to Estonia, and there we boarded a train, and we went to Bergen in Norway. First we went to Sweden, to Stockholm, and we went on the ship called the Gripsholm. So and the ship hit a mine. It was very, very crowded, and because we had no kosher food, so we had hardly anything to eat. And then when we got to Norway, they gave us, the Jewish community heard that there was a ship of refugees, so they brought us herring, and that's when we were happy. We had potatoes and herring, And that was it. And it took us three weeks for the voyage.
And Rose, can I ask, when you left your Rakashek, when you left the town, did you have friends that you went to say goodbye? And
I had these two friends. I really didn't have. My sisters had a lot of friends, and
what happened to your friends in the picture?
everybody perished. We lost contact.
You lost contact?
Everybody. Poland, the Germans came in right away. Right away, and they just took it over.
And when you left, do you remember leaving the house? Do you remember?
Yes, I remember walking out. It was at night, and we had to go to Kovna, and we stayed. We did stay with a cousin in Kovna. We had to wait for a few days, and that was a Brik. He was a well-known lawyer in Kovna, and their son. They were in the ghetto, and they whisked their son out in a sack of potatoes. He was 6 years old, and he was Aaron Barak, who is the Supreme Court here.
That's your relative?
That's relative. So he survived, and his parents survived, and they lived in Yerushalayim, and I did see them many times.
Are you in touch with them?
Well, they've passed away.
No, but
we were in touch. They even came to visit us in New York from Israel.
And since you've come to Israel, have you been in touch?
With Aaron Barak, no. My brother was in touch with him all the time. Because,
And can I ask, when you left your home, what could you take with you? Was there...
Nothing, but my mother took perenes. That's the quilts that are made with feather, and they're called perenes. The only thing we took with us was perenes, candlesticks, and a copper pot for fish that we made gefilte fish in. That was it. We ran with nothing, really nothing. We just went. We just closed the door and left.
And these pictures that you have, how did these pictures survive?
Well, some of them. Well, these we brought with us. No, some of these. This we brought with us. This is from here. This most of them are from here. This is from Rakshik. So that's when our family from Rakshik. So we brought them with us.
Maybe you sent them to America.
No, we brought them with us. We did take out some pictures. That's all we could. And there weren't many, because in those years you didn't have cameras, really.
And you weren't sad to leave your home, or?
I personally was happy to leave my home, because I really didn't. I lived in fear, because we all we heard was pogrom. A pogrom might come. So I was not very happy. I was young and I was frightened. My brother was, because he was in Telz, the Rav there told him not to go to America because it would ruin him. He was such an outstanding student in the yeshiva. So they said, don't go, you stay behind. And my mother was insistent that he come, so she wrote him a letter to say, come with us. And my father wrote him a letter, listen to your mother. So he finally went to America. But they wanted him, because he was such a good student in Telz. And when he, for the rest of his life, people called him Telzer, because he was...
and did he go with you on the boat, or did he come?
Oh, yes. No, he came with us, yes. He came with us on... we went as a family together. Yeah.
And Rose, can I ask, when he was in America, He went to Ner Yisrael?
in Ner Yisrael.
How come he didn't go to Telz when they re-established Telz in Cleveland?
They established it a little bit later. Rabbi Gifter
Rabbi Gifter, yeah.
established it later, and he was already in Lakewood. And Rabbi Aaron Kotler was very fond of my brother. He thought he was so outstanding, and he gave my brother smicha, and my brother, when he was dying, when he was passing away, he had eight children, and he instructed them. Because he was a very humble man, he said, don't put anything on Mama Tseva except that Rabbi Cutler gave me smicha. I was in Lakewood, and that I davened in Vatican, in the
And this is a picture of your very special show. And can I ask, when you got to America,
Yes.
you remember the Statue of Liberty?
I remember as soon as I saw the Statue of Liberty, I was enthralled, and I was so extremely happy. I just took on it like a new adventure in my life, and I think I think we were all happy, but I just jumped for joy. I said, this is where I want to be, freedom. It provided us freedom.
And where did you go when you got to America?
We lived in Belmar, New Jersey, where my father's brother had a rooming house for the summer, and we lived there until my father got a job as a shochet in Baltimore. So we were there for about 4 months at first, in January of 1940, and then my father went to Baltimore, and we moved to Baltimore. We went to public school. Nachum went to yeshiva, and they didn't know what to do with us, so they put my two sisters who were older than I, we were all enrolled in the first grade because we didn't know the language. But subsequently they started to skip us because they saw we could understand and we knew math. So we went through public school, and because there was a Jewish day school that was just forming, the Beis Yaakov in Baltimore, but we were in public school, and then ultimately Hebrew College.
And public school, did you manage to make friends with the other children?
Yes, children. There were many non-Jewish children. Yes, we did.
With Jewish, and there were Jewish children as well?
Yes, and yes, there were some Jewish children, and they were it was half and half.
And you were friends with everybody?
I acclimated I loved the American dream, and I acclimated immediately. I just loved it. And I was determined to learn to speak English without an accent in 6 months, and we did, all of us. In 6 months we were speaking fluent English.
And did any of the kids ask where you were from or your background?
They knew we were European. First of all, we had less than anybody else, clothing. We had maybe hand-me-downs, and we were European. My father had a long beard, and it just wasn't done. In fact, when we got off the boat, the first thing my two aunts did was the next day they took my father to the barber, and they said, in America you can't have such a long beard. So they cut his beard, they trimmed it very much, and for the rest of his life he would not let anybody touch his beard because he was afraid it would be cut.
So here you have a picture of your...
This is my father. So, he had a short beard for the rest of his life. But he never really, he learned to speak English a bit, but really a broken English. And we got along, and my mother always said, both my parents said, we may not have much, but you're going to have the best education, because that was most important for us, and we did.
And can I ask, Rose, the Jewish community in Baltimore, were they warm to your family? Did they accept you?
Yes, some people were in our shul. Yes, they were very nice, and they were guiding us. Like, we didn't know when school started at first. We didn't understand. There were no social workers or anything. You just enrolled in a school. You didn't know what class, what grade. So, to put like a 10-year-old into first grade was unheard of. But they did. But then they started to skip us. And we were good students, so they realized that. So gradually we got to the right grade that we were in. And and it was and Baltimore's a very good city to grow up in. It was Jewish, but it wasn't so dati, it wasn't so from where we lived, but we had a nice rabbi. We went to shul, and we acclimated, we got used to it.
And your parents' friends, were a lot of them from Lithuania or survivors?
No, there were, at that time, we were the first, nobody had seen an immigrant. They didn't know, because it was 1940. There was nobody coming from Europe, nobody coming. So we were really called the greenhorns. We were the Gerina. And we were that way. There were no other immigrants. So we were like unique. We were different. And that's why I think we wanted to acclimate so fast. But my parents always remained, European values, and that was okay.
And can I ask you, Rose, now in 1940, the war starting, did you know what was going on in Europe?
Well, we knew. In fact, my parents always lamented, look what's happening. You didn't really know too much, but you knew there was death, and we didn't know that about the concentration camps as much. At the beginning of 1940, it wasn't publicized at all. But in 1942, there were a group of 200 rabbis who went to the White House to march in front of the White House to see if President Roosevelt would grant visas or bomb the train tracks or something. My father was one of those 200 rabbis.
He joined?
Yes, he went to, and they marched. They were there for 2 days in Washington, and my father came back. He said, Roosevelt didn't even come out of the White House. Well, of course he wouldn't, but it had no effect then. And I think they were aware that the railroads were bringing Jews, but they didn't care. He didn't care.
So your father was one of that group?
He was one of the 200 we had.
These were Orthodox rabbis that marched in Washington?
Yes, they marched in Washington.
That was Hillel Cook, or Peter Bergson. He was he organized that march.
Right.
And it's very sad that President Roosevelt didn't even go out to meet them.
No, he did not. And there was no announcement from Roosevelt at all, no acknowledgement that all these rabbis came from all over the United States to march there. No acknowledgement.
But that act, what your father did and the other rabbis, is extremely significant, because it showed that people knew and that they tried to do something.
They tried to do something. People were afraid, but at that time I think there was Rabbi Wise from Cincinnati, was he? And he tried. It just it didn't help. Nothing helped. Nothing helped. If they would have just bombed the train tracks, it would have helped so much. But nobody cared. It was like a hidden thing. Occasionally you got an announcement on the radio about concentration camps, but not much. Not much.
In the newspapers, even the New York Times, they buried the stories.
No. And in the Jewish, there was the Allgemeine Journal, and there were many Jewish newspapers. they didn't really know. It's not like nowadays, you know, everything. You really didn't know, and you know, being not aware of what's happening, the American life just went on. And you know, there was a war, and people were drafted in the United States. There were many boys who weren't there, you know, but they were just fighting the war far away.
And what did your parents think of Roosevelt, or your parents' friends?
Well, they, you know, they thought he was very pro-Jewish, but he really wasn't. No news came out. You just didn't know. In fact, it was a humorous thing that they used to call Roosevelt Rosenberg, because they thought he was so favorable to the Jews, but he wasn't. His wife was, Eleanor Roosevelt, but he wasn't.
But they knew when the St. Louis came, and they didn't give them rights to offload, and it was sent back.
And look, they sent the ship back, the ship that came here. They begged them, they were here, begged them to let them off.
It was the St. Louis.
And the St. Louis, yeah. And they had to go back, and they all perished.
There was part of them that didn't, that went to England.
Few, yeah.
And there were a few that survived, and there's one survivor in White Lagoon that was on that ship.
Oh, really? That was on the ship?
Yeah.
And that was a terrible tragedy. They were really here begging. And you know, all the immigrants who came, the survivors, have all done pretty well in the United States. They all became businessmen and educators, and they really were. It was a good aliyah, but there weren't many.
Can I ask, when did you and your family really get to know that there were concentration camps and what the horrendous things that were happening?
There were some news coming out, like in 1941 or 42. All I remember is my mother always lamenting. She just could not sleep, she said, because she knows that there was a Holocaust, that there were Jews being killed. And actually, she was right. She just knew it, because first of all, we had sent letters to our relatives, and the letters stopped coming. At first, when we first came in 1940, we were able to send a package or so, and a letter, and the letters stopped coming. So we knew, we were aware. And my mother, to her dying day, she always lamented that, look what happened to all the families, to all the townspeople. Because even as we look nowadays, there are very few Litvaks around.
Lithuania has one of the highest percentage that were killed.
I think 95% of Lithuanian Jews were killed, because the Poles came right in, and the Lithuanians were as bad as the Germans, really. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And after the war, when the war ended, do you remember the day that...
Oh, yes, 1945. Oh, what joy there was in the streets. But then the sad news came about the Holocaust, about the concentration camps. Then that was a blow. And then you had to seek people who were, who might have been alive. It was very hard. Yeah, then you realized it.
And then did many refugees from Europe come to Baltimore, or did you?
No, there were none. Just one woman who was a cousin of ours, and she was also a Pintashevich. She was related to my aunt, who gave us the money to leave Europe. So she survived by hiding in the woods. She did not look Jewish, so she hid in the woods, and she ultimately came to Baltimore. And my father made a shidduch between her and another shochet that he knew, and she lived there. She was a very shrewd lady. I remember her. And That's it.
And Rose, do you remember in 47 with the partition plan?
Yes.
And the establishment of the State of Israel?
Oh, yes. Oh, we listened so carefully to the radio to see the partition, how happy we were, really, that, there'll be a land, because we had relatives in Israel too. And they all, some of them came from Lita. They came, yes. Oh, sure, that was great moments in history. But being as Americanized as I wanted to become, there was always, like they say, a pinta Yid, a pinta Litvak in me, really. To this day, when I meet a Litvak, I'm so happy. But you don't meet many of them at all. So
in Baltimore, were there any other Litvaks?
No, not really. The people in Baltimore had been there for years, the Jewish community. Their ancestors came in like in 1910, 1912. So, and they were very Americanized already. There weren't really, people were born, not many people were born in Europe that I recall in those years.
But the community did accept you and your family?
The community, yes, because we were with the yeshiva community. And we belonged to a shul that was good, but there was not, then they formed, yes, there were Zionistic groups that we formed when I was young. We were Habonim and Mizrahi groups and Israeli dancing, we tried. But most people were like much more American, just really solid Americans. Mm-hmm.
And your sisters, were they as happy as you were to be an American?
My one sister was not happy, Esther. She was a very outstanding student. She's the one who wrote the book, Esther. This is Esther. She had many friends in Rakashik, very nice, very, very nice. She was popular, and when she came to America, she always was more European, more serious, and my other sister too. They were more serious. It was students, and they really weren't as American. They always had that.
And your brother must have been...
My brother was, he was in a firm environment. So he was a very good student. In fact, they even allowed him to go to Johns Hopkins when he was still in Baltimore near Yisrael. So he wanted to go to college, and he was very good in math. So math was his major, and he went to Johns Hopkins at night.
And he got a degree?
He didn't get a degree because then he went off to Lakewood, and he got a smicha degree.
Which is more important.
That's what he really wanted, but he did enjoy.
And did he ever go to the Tells in Cleveland?
No.
But to visit, or?
He knew Rabbi Gifter. Rabbi Gifter actually came to our house in Akashik. Rabbi Gifter was from, and then he came to visit us in Akashik. Yeah, Rabbi Gifter. And then he went, there was a Rabbi Kamenetsky, Shmuel Kamenetsky, and Binyamin Kamenetsky. So Binyamin was my brother's good friend from there, Israel. He did not go to Lakewood when the Rabbi the Cutler wanted them, but my brother did. Yeah, and they kept up in touch for all their life, when Nachum came. Mm-hmm.
And you coming to Israel, you always wanted to come?
No, I wasn't. I was very American, and I didn't think I was going to come, but I was always very Zionistic. I did come to Israel twice a year. The past 30 years. I always came for Pesach and for Sukkot. And then we liked it. I liked Israel, but when my daughter announced that she was making Aliyah 15 years ago, I was shocked. I wasn't really surprised. I was shocked because I knew since she was 10 years old, she always said she's going to live here someday. And she did when, after she was married a number of years, they decided to go. So they came, they had 3 children, and her daughter, the oldest one, had just gotten married in New York, and she remained. She's there, she's menahelet in a very large day school now in West Hempstead, New York, and her 2 boys came here, and they're really in the army, and they do the Israeli thing, really.
And Rose, can you tell us, you mentioned in passing, but it's a very big deal, that you have a relative who won the Nobel Prize.
Yes, yes.
So, who is the relative? You could just tell us a little bit about
my cousin, Rabbi Yallo, was my uncle, my mother's brother. And he had a son, Aaron Yallo, and Aaron was a physicist, and his wife, he was married to Rosalind Sussman Yallo, and she did a lot of research, and she won, in 1979, she won the Nobel Prize. And I just have the picture of her at her wedding. We were all there. I remember. This
is the picture of her wedding?
Yeah, this is a picture of her wedding. And we were there.
And we have Rabbi Yallo in the next picture as well.
And this is Rabbi Yallo. That's when we met him at the airport. And
is she still alive?
She died. She passed away about 10 years ago. She lived in the Bronx, New York, and we saw them very frequently, and I spoke to her husband, my cousin Aaron, who was wonderful. He was very, very interested in the family and in what happened to us. And I spoke to him, every few weeks for sure. Yeah, for a long time.
So you must have been extremely proud to have...
Yes. In fact, one year my husband was a chazan. He was a lawyer, but he also had a beautiful voice. So in the Yallo Shul that they lived in the Bronx, New York, they hired my husband to be the chazan for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And we went there, and it was very interesting because there were a lot of scientists at the table. It was a very interesting Rosh Hashanah, really. So that was then.
It's a big, to get a Nobel Prize for medicine.
To get the Nobel, it was really a big thing. Yeah, we were very, very honored. And
It's amazing. And Rose, can I just ask you, looking back,
yes,
when you speak to your children and grandchildren, what message do you impart?
That they should know their heritage. They know where they're coming from. Luckily, my children and all my siblings' children are Dati, and they have each contributed something to life and to our way of life. And I just told them to live with their lives with humility and honesty, and be proud of being a person of the Jewish people, and to know their heritage, and to work hard to attain high goals that they set for themselves, and to work hard and to live with hope.
And did you speak to your children? Do they know Yiddish? Did you continue?
No, unfortunately. When my mother passed away in 1968, they lived in Baltimore, my parents, but he couldn't stay in Baltimore by himself, so he came to live with us and he lived with us for 17 years until he passed away in 1984. And and he was a person who, he spent his days learning Talmud. He was very, very happy. He was a very kind, wonderful individual who was loved by whoever he met in life. The Goyim, the non-Jews, Jews, everybody came to visit him, to see him. They loved to speak to him. So he spoke to me in Yiddish all the time. We spoke in Yiddish. And my children heard it, but I didn't insist. So they spoke to their Zaidi in English, and he would answer them in his broken English or in the Yiddish. And that was it. But it was wonderful for them to live with a European Jew in our house. They really grew up with him, and it was a wonderful thing. They appreciate it to this day.
So Rose, I just want to thank you. This has been so special, and I'm so incredibly grateful to you, and I just want to wish you just all the mazel and bracha, and your story is really unbelievable, and your parents were so, they had the nevuah, the prophet, that they should leave, because it was a very difficult thing to leave.
Very difficult.
But if they wouldn't have left...
My mother left without, on a Saturday night after Shabbos, she walked to the train station. It was cold then, and had no money, no food on her, and she said, "I'm not coming back until I get this visa." And she had to sit and strike. Where did you hear that before?
But if she wouldn't have done that, and if your father wouldn't have agreed, we wouldn't be sitting here today.
Not at all. And not only that, from that, they had, from their 4 children, there are many, many grandchildren, and many, many great-grandchildren.
Baruch Hashem.
So it was wonderful. It was like a whole city.
That's incredible. So, and if you look at these pictures and you think, it's so precious, these pictures, and to think, because what your parents did, you here, but it's unbelievable.
Yes.
So you come from such a distinguished family and such a legacy, and
a very humble family.
Very modest.
Very modest. Not rich, but everybody's well educated, and we're all Zionistic. We want the best for Israel.
Well, it's wonderful, but you're so rich in your tradition and in life.
Yes.
And I just want to thank you, and you should have mazel and bracha, and it's been such an honor and a privilege to be with you.
Thank you. I'm so happy I met you.
I'm so delighted as well.
Really, thank you very much.
But Rose, you should just have all the mazel and bracha and all of Hashem's blessings.
Thank you very much.
This has been very, very special.